All right, welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. Friday, September 22nd. Happy fall, happy fall. Yesterday was the first day of fall. I don't know. It may be my favorite season. I love all seasons, but I love it when the brisk chill of fall comes through the air and I start thinking about pumpkins, Halloween, Thanksgiving, rolling right into Christmas, even though everybody loves Christmas. But what's the precursor to Christmas? Plus, I was born in the fall, so that's probably a little bit has a little bit something to do with it. It's super dark over here today. All right, it looks really crummy in here because there is a tropical storm. If we get knocked out, we get knocked out. But I wanted to try to at least do this episode because it's the week. We're headed into the weekend. It's Friday, Free Will and Friday. So get your Q&As in, throw your questions in the comment box. Laura will grab them and throw them in, and we'll leave hopefully ample time to answer them. Two things I want to talk about today. One, there's been a lot of talk. You saw DeSantis's pollsters put it out. It's a Hail Mary. That if Trump is convicted of a felon, then he will lose badly because people won't vote for a felony. Want to talk about that today, which is like 20-something% of Republicans would vote for Joe Biden and all these other claims. All right, so we're going to dig into those a little bit more. And then first, though, is really about the DeSantis campaign. This is new age reality TV, meaning we live in reality here, okay? The truth is, the reality is this campaign is, I told Sebastian Gorka on Newsmax over a month ago that this campaign was on life support. It was on life support months ago. And this idea, that this was still competitive was it was the real mirage, as his pollsters keep saying about other things. The real mirage here, folks, was that this was ever a competitive primary. It was not. It's not I can't find a comparable example in modern history to how not, competitive this primary has been. In 1999, we saw Steve Kornacki try to draw that same example, but even he, and this is what I've been telling you for a long time, even he is forced to point out, it's not that he wants to, he's trying to be honest. The difference with Bush and Trump is that, 20% of Bush's vote, when pollsters would ask him, would say, oh, I won't change my mind. Donald Trump's been around 80%, I won't change my mind for months. So, and he's constantly, continuously increased. So it was different when it was 80% of 45%, folks, or 75% of 45%, and then 75% of 50%, and then 80% of 50%, and then 80% of 55%, and now 80% of 60+% in a lot of polls, except for the Reuters poll, which I know everyone's mocking this morning. Reuters is just trash, folks. 2020, it was on our list of the worst pollsters. They pulled not only the national race wrong, they pulled every single battleground state incorrectly outside of the sampling era. Every single one. So until they show a little bit more proficiency in polling presidential elections, I really don't care. If they're an outlier, trust the tranches, folks. Trust the tranches. They're in the tranche all by themselves. Trump bearish now. They move from DeSantis bearish to Trump bearish, or Trump bear if you're a financial guy, right? And they are late to the game. They're in it all by themselves. They're not even in it with CNN anymore, who we used as an example to show how the tranches identify trends and bias. Even CNN is Trump +1, folks. Okay? Even CNN has Trump at 60% in the primary. For them to be at 50% and Biden +5. And by the way, they just polled. Why would they re-release a poll before the month's up? Trust the tranches. All right, so what everyone really is talking about that voters aren't being told is I can't even tell. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 conversations alone this week with insiders and donors that, one says he's not going to make it to Thanksgiving. Another one says he's not even going to make it to Halloween. Another one said, hey, I believe Jeff Rowe when he gave that deadline, and we're halfway through that deadline. So that puts us just shy of Halloween. And the common thread of all of these people who still, and some of them still do support DeSantis, the common thread is this debate next week. Is it? And if he doesn't do something miraculous, there's just no more money. The PAC has money, but the PAC is doing something that's really, really risky. We just saw Bob Menendez indicted, today. Bob Menendez has been corrupt for a very long time. Why is he being indicted now? Right? What Bob Menendez did is perfectly normal corruption. What the PAC is doing is really walking up to the line of violating laws, not just campaign finance regulations, but they are walking up to the line. No campaign has ever pushed the envelope this much when it comes to the campaign is dead, out of money. We need the money in the PAC to run the campaign. Nobody has done this. This is a whole other level. And I'm not sure there's a whole lot of people who are willing to keep their head on the chopping block if it's a losing campaign. So there's a whole lot going on that you're just not being told. I want to read something from CNN, and then I'll get into more specifics of what people have been telling me, okay? Oh, not CNN, Politico, excuse me. I want to read it because then the question becomes, what's the fallout of a DeSantis dropout? 2 months ago, a friend who works for Ron DeSantis called me up and asked me, and I know what he was doing. He was trying to feel me out. He knows that I talk to people everywhere. And basically what I think he was hoping I would do was go back to Trump world and try to soften the reception he would get, as if like they give a damn what I have to say. But that's what I believe that he was trying to do. So there's been people in that camp for a while now, trying to make plans to come out of this thing unscathed, because the fallout is going to be big. And one of the things I said from the very beginning is that the people who pushed Ron DeSantis to do this did not have his best interest at heart. I showed something to locals the other day, comment that I got from some friggin' troll, but it's somebody I'd known for years, but I'm not going to get into it. But I get these comments now multiple times a day, and it's like they're painting Ron DeSantis as like a victim here. And someone like me, I told them the truth every step of the way. I polled the electorate correctly every step of the way. I led everyone in these trends every step of the way. So I'm not the bad guy here. I'm not the villain because you didn't listen. The people who pushed DeSantis to do this did not have his best interest at heart. And I said this months and months and months ago. Not only if this goes bad for you, will you be destroyed as a national figure, but you will badly weaken your position in the state of Florida. And that's not good for the state. A state that, by the way, has been drifting to the right. Why? Organically? No, because a whole lot of people who came way before his team ever did had put a lot of work into it. And you're going to weaken their hand if you become a lame duck governor. Now, here we are. Let's just put it in. Let's bring it up. Waiting for him to drop out. DeSantis' influence nosedives in Florida. And the only thing that gives me a little bit of consolation here is that my locals page is obviously looking at some of these ridiculous comments and remarks and saying, what the hell is wrong with these people? All you did was tell them exactly how this was going to end for them. It's not your fault they did not listen. Here we go. Here's another one. Republicans are going to have an emboldened minority doing everything. Listen, you have to understand because people are, what are you talking about, Rich? Republicans are in firm control of Florida. They only were because Ron DeSantis didn't have an adversarial media or legislature. They did basically everything they were told because of whatever, the popularity of, remember, he was viewed as MAGA. So even people who wanted to return to the way things were, I would say pre-18 in Florida, they were, now we're afraid to do so because it's just become a different animal. Florida is Trumpy. It's not just Republican anymore. It's Trumpy. Adam Putnam was a very popular guy in Florida among Republicans. He was by far the favorite to win the gubernatorial nomination in 2018. All it took was a single Trump endorsement. He shifted the race almost net 50 points in like 2 weeks. depending on what poll you believe, a low of 35, 40 to a high of almost 50. It's a very Trumpy state. But before this, it was kind of a lot like Georgia. I mean, not as bad as Georgia or like Louisiana or something, but it had this, especially in North Florida, it had this rhino tinge where, I remember this going back to Rubio's time as the speaker. This constant country club republicanism that would get in the way of doing even more, even more, even more. Now, that's going to be at risk here. Tallahassee, Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis is losing his clout in Florida. This is a disaster for Republicans. Whether you like Ron DeSantis or not, him having firm control of his government and of the agenda is a good thing if you're a Republican. Some party members view the once powerful governor as weakened amid his campaign struggles. Oh, it's nothing yet. You haven't seen nothing yet. You come back with your tail between your legs because you're losing to the president 60-something to 18 in your own state. The last poll we did was 58, 19? The latest phone interviews are Trump's in the mid-60s. Whereas DeSantis around 16, 17% in Florida. It's bad. The chair of the Republican Party of Florida urged executive committee members to attend all GOP candidate events, giving cover to party faithful who want to attend a dinner at Mar-a-Lago with former President Donald Trump. And the board that oversees many of Florida's affordable housing programs this month placed on leave its executive director who was helped into the job by a top DeSantis advisor. Interviews with nearly 24 lobbyists, political consultants, and lawmakers revealed that DeSantis' struggles as a presidential candidate have already eroded his influence in Florida. This is absolutely true, and it's been the case for like 60 days that it was visible to anyone who has any connections or any influence or any connection to both sides of this. And then, of course, the voter itself, because that's ultimately what drives this. If you become weak with the voting base, they're politicians, folks. They lick their finger, they stick their finger in the air, and they see which way the wind is blowing. When you're getting killed in your own home state, people abandon you. There is a widespread expectation that his candidacy will end in failure. His standing at home may depend on how long he slogs forward in the presidential campaign and how he will manage his exit from the race if he eventually drops out. And I know why they're hedging like that, because there's, like I said, the we're not going to make it to Halloween crowd. There's the we're out by Thanksgiving crowd. And there's general agreement over this next debate. This is make or break. But there is also this whisper, this is why I wanted to do the show together with these segments, because there is this whisper that it's not even a whisper anymore. It was a whisper months ago that we don't have to win. We just have to have a few delegates and more delegates than everybody else. So even if we get killed, aren't campaigning anymore, have no more money, if we have 160 delegates because of, low allocation here, allocation there, then when Trump is convicted of a felony later, we can come back and say, he can't win as a felon. You better unbind those delegates and put somebody else as the nominee. There is most definitely that. Now, it may be just a matter of time before Florida Republicans, once unflinchingly loyal, seek distance from DeSantis and his hardball governing methods. Before I read this quote, that's a very, very important paragraph. Trump governs with relationships. Okay? Trump governs with flattery, with bond building. Okay, it's very, very different. Does he know how to play hardball? Of course, Donald Trump knows how to play hardball. DeSantis doesn't have any of the personal skills or the interrelationship skills, people power that Donald Trump has. So instead, he governs through Machiavellian I mean, really, I don't know how else to say it. Is there a better way to explain it, Laura? Machiavellian. Sure, I can make your life real easy, or I can make your life really hard. There, that is absolutely effective in many, many instances. The problem is when you do that, you also build bitterness behind your back. And when the time comes to stab you in the back, there's a line stretching around the corner of people waiting to do it and then twist. You don't get the assumption they are measuring drapes anymore. They are waiting for him to drop out. One longtime Republican consultant in Tallahassee said of those working for the governor. That's a twist. In case you don't get it, then there's a lot worse twist than this. The consultant, like others quoted in this story, was granted anonymity to freely discuss this sensitive situation. Why? He doesn't want to lose customers. State Representative Daniel Perez, the Miami Republican in line to become the next state House Speaker, urged his GOP colleagues this week to move more carefully in the future, saying that, quote, the problems with wielding the power of government like a hammer is that people start looking like nails. Oh, man. I don't know Perez personally, but I do feel like Florida is a great example of the direction the Republican Party could and should move in. And I only know them, I only know Perez through the things I've heard in comments like this. I think that's probably a good bet that Perez is next in line. It's a big, big jump from Marco Rubio, by the way. Perez insisted his comment was not a message to the governor, but added, that being said, the legislature can't work alone. The legislature works with the governor. And no matter how he framed his comments, Perez's words were being viewed as a rejoinder to DeSantis, of course. One Tallahassee lobbyist said it was a signal that the conveyor belt legislature that passed whatever DeSantis wanted is coming to an end. This sucks if you're a Florida Republican. Dare I say he screwed you? Dare I say he sacrificed you for his political run? It was a gamble. He gambled with you. That's my point. He gambled with you. All of these things, concealed carry, Anthony Sabatini couldn't get him to pay attention to in year 2 or 3 for the life of him. Even the abortion ban became a campaign wedge. It wasn't a principle. It was a, how do we outflank Donald Trump in Iowa? Let's do the 6-week abortion ban. Where was it in his first term? Where was concealed carry in his first term? There was a lot left to do. There is a lot left to do. Even though Sabatini eventually got his way, at least for the most part, not the whole way. But the conveyor belt is going to come to an end if you can't get to your own home state. DeSantis is one of Florida's most powerful governors and has used his influence and sway over the past 5 years to transform politics in the state, including getting the Republican-controlled legislature to bow to his agenda. He reshaped the state's education system by installing allies in top university positions and pushed well, I would argue that my alma mater got the shit end of the stick on that, pardon my French. I don't think Ben Sass and people like him belong at the University of Florida, nor do they represent even the conservative voices on the university, whom I know well. They were never traditionally conservative like that. They were common sense conservatives, MAGA kind of conservatives, even before MAGA existed. He endorsed dozens of K through 12 school board candidates in the week of the pandemic. Absolutely true. Oh, wait, though. He reshaped and pushed legislation that limits how race and gender are taught. Absolutely, he did. All wildly popular in the state of Florida. He endorsed dozens of K through 12 school board candidates in the wake of the pandemic in an effort to help Republicans control all levers of state government. He's used his power to suspend elected officials, including 2 Democratic prosecutors, while strong arming his own party to approve congressional redistricting maps that favored Republicans. Again, here's a great example. Chris Christie, the fat slob that he is, governed like DeSantis is governed a lot like that, very much strong arm. Like, the problem with governing with a hammer is that people start to look like nails, is a great example. Perez's comment is a great example, too, of the rise and fall of Chris Christie. Very, very similar. Okay. Chris Christie was in charge of the redistricting effort for Republicans. He failed miserably. If Ron DeSantis didn't have the clout to be able to push the map the way he did, Republicans could be looking at a different situation in the House. Why? Because everywhere else, even North Carolina Republicans, they fight too, but they only recently got control of the Supreme Court there. And when they had gotten their map the way they wanted it, what happened? Governor Cooper said, "Oh, okay, sure," and abided by the deal because he played chicken with the budget and he lost. But he had a backup, the state Supreme Court, who called the map racist, and Republicans lost 2 seats. So this is going to matter if he limps back to Florida. This will matter to you if you live in Florida. This will matter to all Republicans. Florida is becoming, along with, because I'm not sure about Ohio yet, but Florida is, and as far as MAGA goes, I'm perfectly sure about Ohio. Ohio and Florida are becoming the heart of the party if it moves in the direction of Trumpism. And if it doesn't, there'll also be very good examples of how everything's going to come down on them. You can't have a weakened governor in one of those states right now, folks. You just can't. But you're going to get one. That was always the risk. He's used his power to suspend elected officials, et cetera, et cetera. He's also known for his combative streak, willing to fight major corporations like the Walt Disney Company, Google, and the cruise line industry. But DeSantis' troubles on the campaign trail have emboldened some in his party who are exhausted by his aggressive tactics. The state party last week rescinded a loyalty pledge that would have obligated the GOP primary candidates to endorse the eventual presidential nominee, Republican. A stunning turnaround made at the behest of Trump supporters and against DeSantis's wishes. Let's go back now because I'm seeing articles about California. Let's get real. You had people that were supposed to be arguing in favor of Donald Trump, leading him down the primrose path. They almost cost him 50 to 60 delegates. Sorry, Dick, but it's true. Their own advisor, Dick Morris, went on War Room with Peter Navarro and told him it's really not that big of a deal because that only matters if it's close. We've gone over the math a million times. We've gone over the delegate rules a million times. I'm not going to do it again. But my point is, they were wrong. It was only due to people like Laura Loomer and others, and yes, myself outlining how those rules work that really saved them there. But that was California, and that was also a defeat for DeSantis. That was bad enough considering how liberal it is there, how Patterson hates Trump, how she's trying to use California, had been for almost a year, as a way to push somebody not Donald Trump. So that was bad enough defeat. But in your own state, bad. And by the way, again, people can call her crazy all they want. That's why I had her on the show, because she's effective. You think Loomer being there and screaming at the top of her lungs or whatever and showing it to people on her Twitter feed, it didn't impact people? Of course it did. Anyway, a major lobbyist in Tallahassee said there's no love lost between the legislature and DeSantis. They are faking it. They are waiting long enough to see the king drained of all his power. It's a slow motion coup. Beyond the Capitol, trustees at Pasco Hernando State College, a small public school near Tampa, it is in Tampa area, bucked DeSantis this week by choosing a new president over an official from the governor's administration, State Juvenile Justice Secretary Eric Hall, who was a finalist for the position. The Tampa Bay Times reported this week. It was surprising because the majority of trustees of the college were appointed by DeSantis in June. Earlier this month, the board of the Florida Housing Finance Corporation the state's affordable housing agency placed its executive director on leave over allegations that he created a hostile work environment, among other issues. The executive director, Mike DiNapoli, was appointed by DeSantis. And billionaire Ken Griffin, you all know already, recently moved to Florida, previously spent $10 million on DeSantis' 2018 and 2022 gubernatorial elections, of which he then transferred through the back over to his president. But he told CNBC that he's sitting out the 24 cycle and doesn't understand who DeSantis is trying to appeal to. The governor still has his supporters and those who fear him. Most of the people interviewed for this story were granted anonymity because they worried about retribution. State Representative Alex, I'm sorry, Alex, if I get your name wrong. Andrade, I think is how you say it. A Pensacola Republican who endorsed DeSantis contended that the governor continues to enjoy strong support among legislators and said sarcastically that it was, quote, shocking that some people in politics are fair weather actors. Now, that is true, but it's also true that if you use this kind of political governing style only and nothing on the personal level and on the relationship level, when you do that, what was it? Maybe a month ago when we read about these endorsements, how Trump is circumventing him and did so even in his own state. Among the legislators he got, how many of them were willing to talk to the Washington Post and then some off the record? Of course, most were off the record, but several of them were saying, I only did this because I'm bullied into doing this. So this is real. He can, of course, they're fair weather friends in politics. That's exactly the point. Sorry, that's what do they call these things, Laura? Circles? Very good. Laura got me this thing, the circle thing. I don't know. Anyway, it's good. He's still a very effective governor. He's the most effective governor I've had in a front seat to watch. Andrade said he still has the veto pen. He also added, I see him as governor. I couldn't care less what is going on nationally, but everyone else does. That is a stalwart supporter, and good for him. But that is not how the game works. GOP House Speaker Paul Renner, who also endorsed the governor, said DeSantis had, quote, the session of the century just a few months ago, and you would have to go back to Jeb Bush to find a governor with this kind of record. Bush notably ran, well, of course, because he, again, had like almost no adversarial relationships with the legislature or the media for that matter. They were very favorable to Jeb Bush. Rick Scott had both kinds of governing styles. And I would argue everything was adversarial with Rick Scott. Everything. Until Hurricane Irma, which they saw his image rebound. And after that, they treated him a little bit better. And he earned the loyalties of some legislators. But it was never like this because that was pre-MAGA. The Bushes for a while had a big honeymoon era. That's true. Charlie Crist, too, also, I would say he was effective because, he was a friggin' rhino, but he was popular for a while. And I don't know how not having a perfect record is a sign of collapsing strength, Renner said. I mean, this is just, nice talk, but it's good for Politico to add the other side. All right, it's 12:30. Let's hurry up. Likewise, the state Republican chair, Christian Ziegler, has pledged to remain neutral in the presidential race despite the recent move urging some party members to attend all GOP events just days after Trump invited Florida Republicans to a dinner at a South Florida resort. Yet, some state lawmakers are still bitter that DeSantis' campaign asked Florida's lawmakers to fundraise for him ahead of the GOP debate in August, according to a former Republican office holder who spoke with them. Quote, few members of the legislature have a relationship with Ron DeSantis, the person said. He's like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. You can't get to him. All you hear about is the great and powerful Oz. This is much, much more. That's a much more reality-based statement when you really, listen to the majority of these people. Brian Griffin, press secretary for the DeSantis campaign, by the way, a gatekeeper himself, right? Asserted that the Florida legislature and state leaders support the governor. Of course, lobbyists, the D.C. crowd, and the agenda-driven college board members will have unpleasant things to say. Ron DeSantis stood up to all of them to do the right thing and deliver for his constituents. Okay. Listen. This guy is just like his job is like twist reality. All right. There are defections because there is a weakening. Period. You can say all that cute stuff and all this nice little platitudes. I stood up to the bad guys. There's weakening. That's why you're seeing these defections. State lawmakers will but did you hear the House Speaker? Just like ignore what Perez said, soon to be House Speaker. Did you just ignore what Perez said? State lawmakers will likely be hesitant to openly defy the governor in the immediate future. That's true. But the next legislative session, beginning in January, will be underway as he's getting his ass kicked. Let me just be as blunt as possible. As he is getting his butt kicked, that is when the legislature, he's going to be asking them to do what he wants. New Hampshire, 5th and 4th place, the last two polls. Last two polls in Iowa, way behind. Tony Fabrizio, who doesn't normally talk like this, that's why I tweeted it yesterday and put it on Locals for everybody to see. Tony Fabrizio said the only thing stone cold dead is Ron DeSantis' campaign. He doesn't make comments like that often. It's because of the solidity, the hardening of Trump's vote. That's why he's feeling more confident in saying that. Even the rise of Nikki Haley is coming along with not people who aren't really fond of Nikki Haley. She's just like the candidate du jour, but her base, her foundation is very weak. If you do the real quick math, folks, Nikki Haley's solid base of support in Iowa is about 4%, 3.8%. Ron DeSantis is about 4.8%, 5%. So the rest of them easily within that 16, 15, 14, 12, 13, and even Ron DeSantis fell another 6 points to 13. Within that 12 to 13%, most of them say they're willing to change their minds. And the problem that they all have is that the majority of their supporters still have a positive view of President Trump. So at the end of the day, when winning happens, it's steamroll. It's like a snowball. Okay. Asked about the governor standing in Florida, the Trump campaign described DeSantis as dropping like a rock and failing badly. All right. And by the way, I skipped over this. The session will be underway as those early states are ongoing, and early wins by Trump could effectively end DeSantis' campaign and dilute his clout in Florida. This week, 3 different Republican members of Florida's congressional delegation, including Trump stalwarts Matt Gaetz and Byron Donalds, also began floating their names as candidates for the governor's race that's 3 years away. A move viewed by many as a sign of DeSantis' waning influence since they wouldn't rely on his endorsement. Democrats, who have little power under the GOP supermajority legislature, say they're also seeing signs of the governor's dwindling power. But you know how Republicans are, folks. If they're not united, Democrats don't have to have numbers to greatly impact the legislative agenda. They can take a tiny minority and bring it to a halt when there are Republicans fighting with each other, not under strong and solid leadership. A weakened leader means a fractured party. A fractured party is a fractured majority. A fractured majority means the minority gets to run around and basically shit in their foxholes. House Minority Leader Fentrice Driscoll of Tampa predicted that if DeSantis were to lose the nomination, he would be a very weak, lame duck governor. Quote, I don't know that the legislature is going to play ball with him in the same way they have previously, she said, though she pointed out that DeSantis would still wield power over the budget because of that veto, exactly. State Representative Vicky Lopez, a Miami Republican who had been an advocate and lobbyist over the past few decades before getting elected last year, said it was a, quote, unique situation to have a governor running for president. Right, because they changed the law for him under threat, under force. I mean, that was a very hardball move. For those who don't know, prior to Ron DeSantis making the legislature change the law for him, you could not have in the state of Florida a sitting governor run for president. Why? Among other reasons, this. And it was a law many of us were proud of for a long time. If you are the governor, your job is to be the governor. You want to run for president? That's fine. Can we have a real governor? Lopez predicted that once Perez becomes speakers, lawmakers again would drive the agenda, not the governor. This is the point I'm trying to make. Once you get that MAGA too, I mean, that South Florida MAGA Republicans, really grabbing the gavel, how do you think this is going to go? Quote, I remember a time when the House was the House, the Senate was the Senate. And oh, by the way, there's the governor's office on the plaza level of the state capitol, she said. It's a good way to end it. 12:37. I want to leave a lot of time for questions, but I read the whole thing for a reason. And, I guess the point of what I'm trying to say here is that there was always going to be this negative. It was a risk, as things are in life, but you take a risk and you lose, then you have to pay the price. And unfortunately, he's not the only one who's going to pay the price here. The people of Florida, the voters of Florida will pay the price. That will, do exactly what they all said they didn't want to have. Those doors get opened again for as if they weren't open for these lobbyists already. Let's cut the crap. They had a quote in the article from the gatekeeper who, it's not just moving, folks. I don't know why people won't be more honest with you. It is not a leap for the feds or people who are enemies of them to look at how the governor's gatekeeper was being used. Like, if you wanted FaceTime with the governor, you needed to make a campaign contribution. If you wanted something to be pushed in the legislature, you needed to make a campaign contribution. That's public record at this point. Unfortunately, a good, strong governor executive may decide only the people that I think are pushing interests that my voters care about or the majority cares about. He can direct that. But the walls eventually come crumbling down, and then it's a free-for-all with these, pigs to the trough, and everyone's getting everything they want when there's a weakened executive from the legislature. And that's tragic. And by the way, New Jersey. New Jersey. That's what happened when they lost their strong executive. Tragic. It's tragic. All right. I want to take an early break. Because I want to get as many questions as possible before they run out. But I'm dealing with a tropical storm right now, so what a perfect day to do it. There it is, right up there. You deserve our new solar generator. You got to love 4 Patriots. That's really no doubt right there. Listen, but it isn't just about authorities fearing that extremists are targeting the U.S. power grid. Weather events are a real thing. We're suffering through one right now. We have a natural gas generator, but we don't think that's good enough. We needed a solar generator, and that's why you need one too. The Patriot Power Generator 2000X is portable, but it's powerful enough to easily power your phones, medical devices for you and your loved ones, even appliances like your refrigerator. You can get one right now with all those deals that you just saw up there. You can stack them by going to 4patriots.com and using the promo code TPP10 at checkout. That's 4patriots.com. Use the promo code TPP10 at checkout. This code is for your first purchase only, so make it count. Make it count on something that you need, that is a great deal like this one they're offering right now, and that can save you a ton of money. All right, so go ahead, check it out one more time. 4patriots.com, TPP10 at checkout. By the way, that was smart, guys. You made my life easier. I don't have to bring up the tropical storm if it's right on the screen, right? All right, let's see if we got some questions here. That have to do with it. Is he having a meltdown today? See, this is so on YouTube. Gopher Big Guy 911, and let me see if I can find this thing and put it up. Had said, yep, I got it. All right, the level of seeds coming out of Steve Deese on air today is glorious. He sees his horse is dead. He is at the anger stage of the grief process. All right, so there are some who are having this feeling like one more chance at the debate. We can change the trajectory. Why? Because Nikki Haley very clearly got a little tick up. Although, when we say a surge, folks, I mean 3 to 6% nationally, 6 to 11 in Iowa. Yeah, it's hard for me to really characterize it as a surge. However, it does show there are some people who are just floating back and forth, and there's an opportunity. If you're DeSantis, you're going to want to hit her and knock her back down. But for the most part, reality is starting to sink in. to the DeSantis people and the influencers. Jenna Ellis on Twitter yesterday said that actually, I don't know if you're a principled conservative and it's Biden versus Trump, I don't know how you don't write in or vote for or something ridiculous. She said Robert Kennedy Jr. If he's going to run as an independent. And I mean, this level of intellectual dishonesty and frankly stupidity is why they call it the silly season. All right. This is a person, along with Steve Deese, who just spent over a week lecturing us all about abortion and how much more pure they are than we are, and how superior their value system is to the rest of us, and how Donald Trump is effectively a pro-choice guy. So if you support him, then you're an evil person. You're actually going to burn in hell, as this guy said, with the founding fathers, right? You're going to meet the founding fathers in hell, and you're going to burn along with them. This is why they call it the silly season. By the way, RFK is pro-choice. So again, when I say intellectual dishonesty, I don't know how you could bitch and moan for almost 2 weeks about Trump's response on abortion and opposing the 6-week ban because you lose general elections like that, and then turn to RFK instead, who opposed the overturning of Roe v. Wade, who opposes moderate restrictions on abortion. Again, that's why they call it the silly season. Nobody ever accused her of being intellectually honest. The only accusation of her being principled is one that comes out of her own mouth. So that's not exactly an affirmation. So I mean, it's just dumb stuff but it is indicative of that. I mean, the attacks, and again, I don't know if some of you, and many of you on Locals listening right now, you know what I'm talking about. That's just one attack that we've gotten. I mean, it's just ridiculous. These people are having an absolute meltdown. I got people accusing me of missing states I didn't even poll. They're having delusional breakdowns. But that is how primaries go. And in 16, I would argue that it was bad. Although I do think there was a lot more money spent this time. So there's a lot more angry people because money can gin up people. But again, I think we're in the middle of a realignment, and I wouldn't expect, if you had a way to go chase down Steve Deese's vote, Gopher, in 16 and 20, I don't think you're going to find Donald Trump's bubble filled in with it. All right. I think that's chameleon stuff. All right. So I'm not sure how much you lose from it. I am more concerned about the argument over how much Donald Trump could lose in the event of a felony conviction. I'm more concerned about that than the meltdowns of these people. What they don't seem to understand, Gof, they're less than 2%. So they are those people that we have been showing you. They claim they voted for Trump or supported Trump, but now no longer don't. They are less than 2%. That's it. All right. So their anecdotes, are they a data point? Sure, buddy. They are, but they're not. It's not like scientifically polled trends where they're like identifying or representing here. They're not. So just crazy. Just absolutely crazy. I did see David Sachs, and this is on Getter, from None Ya Business. That's a hilarious handle, man. I love that. I don't know if you're male or female, but I love it. None Ya Business. Oh, that's so good stuff. Did you see David Sachs on List co-hosting fundraiser for Ramaswamy? Yeah. I mean, this is what I'm talking. Listen, the other day I was on the phone with somebody who is I don't want to say this, but it's a wrap. Like, they need a Hail Mary next week, and nobody really expects them to get it. So they need that money, so it continues. The media wants their headlines, so it continues. But the data is very clear. You would need something cataclysmic at this point to change the trajectory of this race. Trump voters are now decided. It's not just that he has a dominant lead anymore. It's that his dominant lead is fueled by people who refuse to change their minds. By the way, Yet another trend we were way ahead of everybody on. Were we not? Were we not the first one in Florida? I mean, in Iowa, to ask people, even though it was like, who's your second choice? Who's this? Who's that? Oh, and I said we could do that. But you know what I care about? I care about how solid their views are. Are they digging their heels in or not? And then who has the voter who won't budge? Way ahead. 2 weeks later, the Seltzer poll comes out and basically mirrors exactly what we said. Now, everybody else is mirroring it. 2 Fox Business polls later, 2 Trafalgar's later. Trafalgar's like basically right where we are. And I don't know if you guys saw that, but we'll show you the latest from Trafalgar. Everybody has misses here and there, but there's still, I still trust certain people outside of my own work than I trust. I don't think there are some pollsters who are going to do their best, and when they're wrong, but they still tried to do their best. And then they're a minority compared to, I think, what we're going to see eventually, which is all of these media polls and most of the university polls are going to change, and they're going to go back to what they did in 2020. So Reuters was like Biden plus 14. So they had Trump tied 2 weeks ago, a re-poll to get a Biden plus 5. I mean, when you have Trump full 10 points less on the primary ballot than everybody else, you might want to stop and say something's wrong. And by the way, I mean, I'll show you something. Let's just look at Roberts first, and then I'll come back and I'll show you something, because I do see there are people asking. The very first question in locals was about the Reuters poll. So I'll just tell you what I personally think about that. I don't know how on earth you could possibly find Trump at just 50 in the primary at this point. It's you really have to poll moderates and really have a weak conservative sample. I don't know. I really I honestly don't know. I'd have to look at their data set. It's just that it makes almost no sense to me whatsoever. And then I'll show you Reuters after this. All right, so if the Republican caucus were held tomorrow, let's look at the report, actually. Let's look at the whole report, just so you see the demographics of it. And I will say this, there's some, I know things about the poll that is inside. They have, I guess, like an insiders club. They will be doing a podcast soon, by the way, too, from what I hear. But so anyway, I don't want to blow them up on it, but oh God, that water's good, Laura. Whatever you bought me, this is amazing. That is so good. It's not a sponsor. I just want to say this. So, like, I'm not making any money off of saying this. I have to preface this because every time I do something like this, some moron says something on Twitter. I'm just telling you, Laura got the boys of the family, and I think she got herself one too. They're called circles, and like you can get different flavors, and they have electrolytes in them. Oh my God, because I'm constantly drinking all day. You know, I was once afraid I was diabetic. I'm constantly drinking water. But no, it's just that I need a lot of water, need a lot of electrolytes. And I got used to it from being in the Army, drinking and hydrating. Anyway, it's amazing. And right now, since I love fall, she gave me Honey Crisp Apple. It's so good. Anyway, so here we are, 1,079 respondents, all Republican caucus goers, likely Republican caucus goers. Response rate's not bad, 1.44, margin of error 2.9, confidence 95, distribution 50. Yes, basic stuff. You know, check out the polling methodology page. How likely are you to vote? 67.4, very likely. We do something different. We do, you know that, guys. We do certain, which is like basically high 90s to 100% certainty, likely, which is more likely than not. That's the probability definition, right? So we don't do very likely. And then we have a probably, which is unlikely. All right. But notice that he still put 6.4% unlikely in there. All right. Very unlikely, 6.5, 4.9. They probably, and I've heard Robert say, why do you have that many very unlikelies in there? Because they probably have vote history. You know, it's like, how can I put this? Like Dolores. You get her on the phone. She's 80 and has voted in every election since like she was eligible to vote in 19 whatever. And she tells you she's unlikely to vote, but you know damn well Dolores is going to vote. She's not a 4 out of 4, folks. She's a 16 out of 16. She's full of crap. That's how. We just use very few of those. We find it's just, everyone's methodology is a little different. So here you can see they still have DeSantis stronger than most in Iowa, 16%. Nikki Haley on the rise, 8.4, 6.8. Tim Scott, Vivek, 6.6. Here's Vivek's issue, which I told you about. Vivek is actually doing better with moderates and suburban moderates, suburban women, than Ron DeSantis is doing. But he's not breaking into stronger self-identified Republicans and conservatives, right? Self-described conservatives, very conservative. And he needs to do that in order to surpass the glass ceiling that he is currently bonking his head against, all right? It is glass. It can be broken. I'm just saying that he's not breaking it yet. Nikki Haley has taken the position of what we saw Tim Scott doing when we polled Iowa last time, which is playing the role of Marco Rubio circa 2016, only you may notice something. It's not as strong. This lane is not as big as it was in 2016. It's just not. For all the talk about, oh my God, majority don't want Trump, which we've proven is demonstrably false, all right? Just because a candidate comes in slightly below 50% does not mean a majority does not want Donald Trump or that candidate. That's how statistics works. And that's a very simpleton way of understanding statistics. It's not that simple. His footprint is actually closer to 75% in Iowa. People who are choosing someone else still have a favorable opinion of him. Some would rather give someone else another try. Here's the kicker, though. Trump is way stronger than he was in 2016 in Iowa right now. Nobody is as strong as Ted Cruz eventually got to be, or was at this point, actually, even. Jeb Bush was like just the high-name character that was getting people to pick him. At the end of the day, Marco Rubio surged last minute to take third place because there was that wing. Nikki Haley and Tim Scott are fighting for that wing. But it's a smaller wing. It's not as big as it was in 2016. Fabrizio had DeSantis lower at 13. Nikki Haley, I believe, was at 12. Well within the sampling errors here. I mean, not for Nikki Haley. They have Nikki Haley. Well, no, I mean, if she's at 11, that's within the sampling error. So it's still totally defendable. Still same universe. Although they still show DeSantis higher than some others. Where were we? 18, 19% last caucus poll? I don't know. I'd like to poll Iowa again. It's interesting. I like polling Iowa. It's a hard state to poll, especially a caucus, but it's cool. The second choicers for these people are interesting. DeSantis's, even though he's, gone full never Trumper with all the people who run him, his second choice is still Donald Trump, his largest share of second choice. Trump's, however, is no longer DeSantis. What do you mean by that, Rich? I mean, if you ask Trump supporters who your second choice is, it's Vivek Ramaswamy. That is happening everywhere. Morning Consult still has nationally that it's DeSantis, but it's much closer. And I think we're right in what we're finding in other states like this one and others. We're right because when you take Trump out of the mix, Vivek and DeSantis are essentially tied at 30, 33%. Where is that coming from? It's coming from Donald Trump supporters once choosing Ron DeSantis as their top second choice, but that is not the case anymore. Trump still gets the majority of Ron DeSantis' vote. He gets most of Vivek's vote. He even gets some from people who absolutely hate his guts. It's just the way it's going. That's why it's absolutely ridiculous and implausible to suggest that you can stop this man from getting to 50 plus 1. You don't even have to win Iowa with 50 plus 1, but if you do, obviously, then it's impossible for someone to beat you, right? Basic arithmetic. All right. In the meantime, what did I say I was gonna go to after this? Yeah, I mean, I know that there were some more questions, but there was something else I wanted to show people, and it totally brain farted, and I've lost my train of thought. Oh, I remember. Here we go. Reuters, which is the first question in locals anyway. What do I make of it? This is what I make of it. I mean, this is from a spreadsheet we were doing from how bad some of these other ones had missed. All right, so here's Reuters aside from their national, which was just terrible. In Florida, they had Biden beating Trump 50-46. Trump ultimately won by more than 3 points. In Michigan, they had Biden beating Trump by 10. He barely won. North Carolina, Biden beating Trump. He lost. Wisconsin, Biden beating Trump by 10. Biden won, but he won by 0.6 of a percentage point. So you have their national poll, which overstated Biden's support by what, 6 or 7 points. So even if, it is what it is, guys. They're also the one and only poll to have Beto O'Rourke beating Ted Cruz. I mean, this is on and on and on and on and on and on. So you poll once a month. I don't understand why you'd re-dip yourself back into the. So I agree with you. For the question on locals, I agree with you. Did they do this just the top of the RCP average? Probably. These are organizations with an enormous amount of money. They want to do everything they possibly can to divide the Republican Party. Probably. What a good question. Which Republican politician currently in power would you say are actually decent and not spineless, corrupt cowards? It depends on what you mean by decent. I don't care about somebody's personal baggage. All right, for instance, are the rumors about Kristi Noem true? Probably. I don't know. What I do know is that because she does things that the voter wants constantly, she gets under assault from it. I mean, they would never be trying to destroy her marriage if she didn't do what the party didn't want her to do. I would say the consulting class didn't want her to do. The media didn't want her to do, which was, of course, back Donald Trump and talk about COVID in reality. Yes, it's very different. Florida is very different than her state when it comes to COVID. But then that's fine. That's how you talk. You say, I would have loved to do what Governor Noem did from the beginning, like Governor Noem did, but I was cautious and afraid because I have an older aging population. By 6 months, 9 months, a year, we started to pivot and do more and implement policies more like Governor Noem. But that's not what they did. They lie and they say, we did this from the beginning. You did not do it from the beginning. You stuck a diaper over my 9-month pregnant wife's face and made her deal with the school system. That's what you did while you locked everybody's business down. That's what you did. You closed the beaches. We couldn't get our vitamin from the sun. You closed the beaches. Businesses went out. I mean, get the hell out of here. Just be honest with it. And for that, she got attacked. This is, I want to shake her over before we get, I'm going to get into his question because it's a good way to go into the next segment. All right. This is the point. I really wanted to talk about this today. The same thing, this thing with DeSantis eventually having to exit the race and the fallout from it, because you did see his PAC polls, and it's paid for by Ron DeSantis for president, okay? Or paid for by Never Back Down PAC. That should have been at the end of that article and I said to Molly Hemingway, you know what? You can't just trash the left. You want to use Dave Portnoy's video of the Washington Post reporter, to talk about propaganda in your classroom in Hillsdale. That's great. You should also probably use a lot of the stuff from the right, because when it comes to, at least from the beginning of the cycle to now, when it comes to using polls as propaganda, the right have been the offenders this year. Now, that will pivot. once Trump defeats everybody. That will pivot, and they will go right back to who they are and what they do. We saw it in 22. It's going to happen. They were better, but they were also better in 18 than they were in 16 and 20. Because why? Because polling midterms is a very different animal than polling presidential cycles. And right now, the right has been the gross offenders of this, trying to make it cases like Shaker Silver's asking right now. Most real situation, Trump far ahead in the primary, but indicted. Biden is his opponent. Can Trump win despite the GOP pigeon-headedness, or will they drag him? Stay right there, Shaker Silver, because we're going to answer that question, and we're going to talk about their claims after this other quick commercial break. I want to tell you about our friends at Jam and Bean. Love your feedback from them. By the way, look at that popcorn. All organic, all natural. It's delicious. As you know, I love it. If you go to jamandbean.com right now and use the promo code TPP40 when you start a new subscription to anything, K-Cups, freshly roasted, you want to grind it yourself, you do what you got to do. Whatever it is, you start a new subscription and use the People's Pundit promo code TPP40, you will get 40% off your next subscription off the top. And then still, when it renews every month, you're going to get another 10% off. So 40 off the jump, right at the beginning, and then 10% off every time the subscription renews. Send us your feedback. My son, I just want to show you this real quick. This is a new fan favorite over here at the Barris household. They sent the vanilla blueberry. Oh my God. And that's not usually for me. But my son's right. It's awesome. And then another one, caramel mocha latte. Oh my goodness. I like the rich stuff. I like the buffalo blue cheese. That's amazing. Sour cream and chives. Amazing. The dill. Amazing. And I know in that sense, I like savory popcorn flavors. They're all delicious though. That's the truth. And we have the seasons coming now, right? The fall's kicking in. They have some really cool ideas. What was the one, Laura, you actually suggested? And they did it. What was it? Can you pop in and say it, Laura? Because it was good. You said, do this with apple pie or something. I don't remember what Laura said, but then they did it. It was amazing. It's so everything they touch is delicious. All right. So sign up. There it is. Promo code TPP40. And let us know. We want to hear your feedback. All right. Shaker, breaker. Let's see. Where is it? I have something teed up I want to talk about with this. Okay. I'm not going to show the one that's new. Okay. I'm not going to show the new poll because it's a DeSantis campaign poll, and I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to give it any credit. They've been wrong every step of the way, these people. Everything they've ever said has been totally bogus. That one of them I'll never forget, of course, folks, from POS was Trump is getting crushed in Minnesota, right? But DeSantis is basically tied. That was one of the more egregious results that we had to endure this year. Meanwhile, I get a call from a friend who's an independent pollster who had just polled Pennsylvania, and it was basically even with Trump, but DeSantis was down by 11. And he's like, there's just no way. If he's down by 11 in the state of Pennsylvania, he has a prayer of being anywhere near Ron DeSantis in Minnesota. And, a lot of us had to sit there and endure that and listen to this crap, right? And then the minute you say something back, you get attacked, right? So that's, not intellectually, not like that, having a discussion like that. No, just garbage nonsense. The non-white is a mirage, right? He's hemorrhaging white voters. Everything. There was like 2 months, a 2-month lag. A 2-month lag. Everything we talked about, everything we said, it took 2 months. Anyway, here is an article from August 17th. And it said some Republicans tire of indictments. Let me get a sip of water. This is very, and to me, when it came out, it was very reminiscent. All right. Are you much more likely to vote for Trump against Biden? Right. And you can see these ridiculous numbers for Republicans, somewhat more likely to vote for Trump against Biden. Right. And the scoop. Right. And this is why, at the end of the day, After running this in front of all of all of these people, first, which is a cardinal sin, a big no-no. And YouGov and Reuters do this all the time. And YouGov is for The Economist, Yahoo, CBS. I don't know that they do it with CBS though as much as I watch it with The Economist and Yahoo all the time. I don't know if I can't. It wouldn't be fair because I'm not sure whether they do it with CBS or not. I have to look. Reuters, Ipsos, they do this all the time. You do not bring up things that can inject a bias, a social bias, or anything into the poll before you ask your core questions. Favorability, approval, head-to-head matchups, whatever it may be. You must ask them first. Did you know Donald Trump's been indicted on 91 counts and he could be a felon? Now, who are you going to vote for? You can't do that. Yet, it's common practice in today's polling. It's unbelievable. It's extremely dishonest. And here we are. They do it. And then you have all of these Republicans, 24%, that say the charges make them less likely to vote for Trump against Joe Biden, more than enough to swing a close general election. This is Joel Benison, the pollster for Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, by the way. And it's a small number of defections within the GOP could spell big trouble for Trump. And then they bring up the AP NORC poll, which is, if there's a poll worse than Reuters, it's this poll. Hillary Clinton plus 14. Final. Joe Biden, I believe it was plus 13 or something like that. Final. They have the most ridiculous generic ballots. They're awful. It's an awful poll. So to bring this up as a way to kind of boost the findings of another poll is ridiculous. And they're adding all of these things. 20% of GOP voters didn't believe the charges against Trump were politically motivated. Okay? Anyway, Benison said, I'm not saying this is a slam dunk. I'm saying he's in a much weakened position than he was compared to 2020, which is the election he lost. Really? Because after asking all of these questions, ladies and gentlemen, he still tied Biden at 46 apiece. So you can bring up all of these. You can bring up all of these things. All right. And it's going to skew the answer to those questions. And I'm so glad Shaker Silver asked this. But then when you get down to the A/B test of it, the core of it, they were still tied at 46. The DeSantis poll didn't show that, but it is also one of the only polls in the last couple of weeks that showed Biden winning by more than 1 point. It already showed Biden winning, period. But then it showed Biden winning by 6 if Trump is a felon. Here's what I'd say. I'd say I agree with the editor of this report and Barack Obama's pollster. Even if the poll is conducted legitimately, which you can't inject bias before you ask the question. That's not legitimate. Even if it is, however, newsflash, Republicans are lying to you. Republican voters are lying to pollsters or themselves. One of those two is most likely the explanation. October 2016. Reuters, MSNBC reports, poll of Florida, Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump after the Billy Bush tape. 23% of Republicans refused to vote for Donald Trump and will cross over and vote for Hillary Clinton. They had Hillary Clinton up big. MSNBC went on and on about it for 48 hours. How many Republicans did Hillary Clinton win? 7%. Fast forward, 2019. CNN poll. 25% of Republicans think that this impeachable offense is a serious thing, should be barring Donald Trump from running for re-election. How many Republicans did Donald Trump lose? Low of 7, high of 9, depending on who you believe. In this day and age, if the impeachment against Joe Biden finds conclusive evidence that Joe Biden is a crook who took money from China through his son. Unlike Bob, let me just say this, Bob, you needed to give that money to a family member. That's how you get away with it in this day and age. Haven't you learned anything from the Bidens and the Obamas? Poor Bob. He put the money in his sock drawer. Perfectly normal corruption, Bob Menendez. Perfectly normal. He ran afoul of the Justice Department because he opposed the neoliberal state on the issues of Iran and Cuba. That's when the DOJ started investigating Bob Menendez, when everyone knew that Bob Menendez is a crook. Mitch McConnell, he's got similar relationships with foreign powers. We all know the Bidens do. Bob Menendez was indicted for that reason. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is it wouldn't matter if it was very clear that Joe Biden is compromised and corrupt. He took money from the Chinese, the Romanians, the Ukrainians. And by the way, what many members of Congress are doing with Ukraine right now is far worse, in my opinion, than what Bob Menendez did with the Saudis. Regardless, you still will not see 23% of Democrats vote for the Republican nominee. It doesn't matter if it's Donald Trump, Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis. It's not going to happen. If they tell the pollster that, they're lying to the pollster or themselves, if the pollster even conducted the survey correctly, which is a big question, obviously, in and of itself, like I just showed you. You can't inject that kind of bias before. And, of course, we have the polls from 20. This is also Reuters. So CNN, Reuters, they're a lot of the same. YouGov had a few that I found, but they weren't that bad. It was like 15% of Republicans say they won't vote for Donald Trump if he is impeached in the U.S. House. It wasn't that bad. But this is another one from Reuters. In the second impeachment after January 6th, 22% of, and they're mostly moderate and liberals, they're going on about moderate and liberal Republicans, think that Donald Trump should be barred from running for president ever again. Yet, fast forward, what is it, 2 years to almost 3? Fast forward almost 3 years, ladies and gentlemen, and Donald Trump is leading in the polls. The point is, a presidential election is an A/B test. Americans know some of this stuff is in their core. Then there's also going to be the cameras in the courtroom in Georgia, right? So what could have accounted for the drop-off in support for impeachment? The cameras. Trump's defenders, Dershowitz and others, did a very good job defending him in public. And as more and more people, even with the media being as disgusting and dishonest as they are, support for that impeachment went down, and those numbers among Republicans who say they would never vote for Trump evaporated to almost nothing. You're going to see the case ripped apart in Georgia. It's going to happen. You won't see it in the federal courts, but that's why they want a gag order. Why do you think Jack Smith wants a gag order? He wants a gag order because he knows when the case is brought, it doesn't matter if he gets a corrupt DC jury, which everyone in America knows is corrupt and slanted and biased. It doesn't matter. People are going to be able to see what the prosecution claimed versus what they're actually going to be able to show in a court of law. And it's going to evaporate. And you're going to have a huge martyr movement in this country with, wanting Trump to get his day in front of the Supreme Court. Dershowitz is right. They know that. That's why they're racing for these convictions on pace with something that can only be accounted for is that they're trying to get those convictions, but not the overturn before the election. So enough time to convict him, but not enough time for him to hear it and get his justice in front of the Supreme Court, which is going to throw it out. They know that. That's why they're doing this. I just don't believe people when they say that. Will there be some that just don't vote because they don't like it? I believe that, yeah. But here's Shaker, and I don't mean to spend so much time on this question, but I think his question goes with what we were going to talk about, and I also think it's very important. No matter who the Republican nominee is, even as unpopular as Joe Biden is, it's going to be a difficult election. I am saying that without a doubt. Donald Trump is not a shoo-in, although it is, regardless of those polls, I think it's fair to say he's a slight favorite at this point and probably will be more so as time goes on. Why? Even the news yesterday, Biden's going to have to run for re-election in a recession. No incumbent has ever won. And if he runs against the guy who had a great economic record, it's going to be hard. And then the people are going to be in pain. And they're going to say, this crook who can't run the country or the economy is trying to put the guy who can in prison. Public opinion is fluid. You have to learn how to read it down the road. All right. Same thing with people, by the way, who are now super strong DeSantis supporters who cheerleaded for the lockdowns when Barnes and I were saying you can't do this. But the polls, Rich, the polls, you don't know what you're talking about. The polls 6 months from now will say something very different. And they did. Remembering now a very public fight with Will Chamberlain over this. Anyone can read a poll right now. Can you read a room? Can you read an environment? Can you read a landscape? Can you tell me what the polls will say? Not today, this afternoon, but 6 months from now, a year from now. That's when you start to get political wisdom. And the landscape is going to favor him, regardless. Trump, meaning him. And I will say this, nobody else has a chance. I'm sorry, it's just true. Because even if you get a fraction of those Republicans who are telling these pollsters this, and they actually either don't vote or vote for Biden, it's nothing. Nothing compared to what they will lose if the party does not stand behind Donald Trump while he's being prosecuted and persecuted like this. Again, they took these people and people like this for granted back in 92, and it did not go well for them. They lost 20 million votes. How many do you think they will lose now? And here's the real kicker in all of this. It wouldn't even matter if you would go out and get those two groups of people that we have been discussing on this show for weeks. The non-registered, but yet eligible targets that we've talked about, and the unlikely. I am registered, but I haven't voted in a long time. You know why? Those people couldn't give a damn about felons. They couldn't give a damn about felony charges for Donald Trump. They don't see it at all the way those yuppie white people see it, because it is whites. And just to get more specific, Shaker, it's whites, more educated whites that would even have that problem as Republicans. These voters and these potential voters that we've been talking about for weeks now, they wouldn't give a damn about a felony conviction on Donald Trump. They see the system for what it is wholeheartedly. They don't live in the pretentious world that the yuppie elites and wannabe yuppie elites live in. So you can actually just replace them for a modest amount of money compared to how much money these people, it's a drop in the bucket compared to how much money these people spend to push this nonsense. So again, I mean, it's really that simple. You have one choice, and and make that choice as strong as possible, or just go down in flames and live with the consequences of that. It's just this nonsense I'm seeing every day on just this nonsense on Twitter every day. What makes you think an election is going to be easy anyway, simply by, I mean, the arguments, the desperation arguments that some of you are pointing out because of the DeSantis campaign being on life support and that it's on its last rope, the desperation arguments are absolutely ridiculous. You still cannot win without him. You can't. It's time to accept that. That's an objective fact. That is not subjective, an opinion. Even bitching and moaning about New Hampshire the other day. That guy was literally telling voters prophets were talking to him. That's number one. Number two, New Hampshire is a very different state than it was 10 years ago. Where have you people been? Legislative districts are always the last ones to follow the trend. Last time I had to sit and argue this, beat the dead horse, was Virginia. Legislative districts are a little bit more localized, a lot more localized. So as the state trends presidentially one way, it is harder to change, or it will take some time before that state will vote that way by district, state house, state senate, even the house. But eventually that trend will catch up. It's just that they don't do it as quick. As first comes president, then comes the senate. And after that, the rest go. So there it is. Let me see. What else am I missing here? Yeah. I don't. And again, just to answer in Dalton's question, Matt Gaetz and JD Vance, and I'm sure there are more. Again, it depends because I don't really care about someone's personal life. I care about whether I'm gauging them as being representative. And this is to this, in Dalton's question about having a spine, who is decent as a spine. I don't want to put, this like false morality gauge in that assessment. I'm thinking of who represents their voters. And with that in mind, it's JD Vance and it's Matt Gaetz and others like that. Now, people may hate them, but JD Vance is doing what the voters who elected him and more want him to do in the state of Ohio. I've polled Florida's 1st congressional district myself in the middle of Matt's, I don't know if you want to call them scandals. They stood by him 100%. Why do you think that is? Because he defends them. So it's a short list. And I don't know how many, I want to add to that off the top of my head, but it's very few and far between. And I'm sure there are other. I don't mean by excluding people. I don't want anyone to think, I'm saying one is not. But that's it. Will Cortez try to come back to MAGA? I don't know. I think if you were to ask my good friend Steve, I think if you were to ask him whether he ever left MAGA, he'd tell you no. Right? I think that's probably the accurate assessment there. What measurable effect has Operation Chaos had in the past? Do you think it would be worth it to try to mount one in 2024? And I guess you mean against Democrats, right? Honestly, in some rare instances, that stuff may work, but I would not suggest anybody waste their time or energy on anything other than what I have been saying. Like if I was, how can I put this? Republicans just don't see an opportunity they have right now, and I don't think wasting time or energy on side shows or side gimmicks before you get, because they can actually, and that's for on YouTube, Sizer or however you say it, that could have an effect. It could, but it's marginal compared to what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if you go out and get these votes, you're going to change the political landscape for a very long time. Forget about Georgia and Arizona and places like that. There's no chance they can win. We're talking about so many votes, and then the Rust Belt, which Republicans appear to have forsaken, which is stupid because you don't want to put all your electoral college eggs in one basket. But in any event, I don't want to talk too much about something until I know how something's going to end up. Let me just put it that way. But you want to have multiple paths to the presidency if you're smart, and this is the way to do it. This is the way to do it. I don't know how else I could be more blunt or direct. They are going to blow an opportunity that they have never had in my lifetime. And it's one that Democrats have long had a better understanding about. Democrats now know that they've essentially capped out. There's nothing. The targets for Democrat new registrations are so minimal compared to what Republicans have. You got Republicans out there trying to stop a herd of Venezuelan migrants right now. I mean, it's unbelievable. Start to learn to play the game. Trump got that in the administration. That stupid idiot, John Bolton, wanting to like declare war on Venezuela because of this. And Trump is just like, you know what? Let Bolton run his mouth and that mustache. Let them in. Let them in. Put them in Florida. You know? It's Republicans have like this. I don't know. I read a book called The Republican Mind years ago, or The Republican Brain. And no, The Republican Mind. And it was by a liberal. I have it actually, still have it. It was by a liberal, and of course he's trying to make fun of Republicans, and I couldn't stay, but I wanted to read it because I don't like people mocking people like this. And what they were saying, what he was basically saying is there's like this some kind of disposition that they have that makes them backward, and it was really very offensive. But it's built on this assumption. It's not even an assumption. It's built on his observation and Democrats' observation that Republicans appear to make the same mistakes over and over and over and over again. They don't seem to be able to learn. My argument is it's not the voters. It's their consultant class and their that professional apparatus that they have built around these losers. And that prevents them from doing it. But, I as I get older, I'm starting to understand more and more where this guy's coming from. Yeah, and that's I got to Derek's thing about Reuters. Just about the Charlie Kirk effort in Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin. This is Jerry or Spider, absolutely recognizing what I just said. Why would you want to limit your path to victory? You don't. That's a great question, though. Follow-up question would be if there are states outside of that group that can be surprise flips in either direction. Generally, the Electoral College map will follow the kind of realignment that seems to be happening now. That's Laura Butler. Laura, 100%. I do think, like, take a University of New Hampshire poll. It's got Biden up by 12. It had Hillary up by 14 when she almost lost it to Donald Trump. That was their final poll in New Hampshire. But New Hampshire is very different than it was in 2016 even. In the last 10 years, New Hampshire has changed greatly. But I do think that there are I have long said, and it's not a lot of electoral votes, but who cares? I have long said that there are Northeastern targets that, demographically speaking, in the era of Trump, Republicans should be doing much better in, but can't without him on the ballot. They just, with the exception of Susan Collins, she obviously performs well in Maine. I don't see why Republicans should not have taken Maine at the presidential level at this point. And it's, I see why. I'm just saying there's no good reason why they haven't done that yet. And they should have. And they haven't because they're losers. I mean, Democrats have shifted battleground states double digits in single election cycles. So, Rich, we've lost Connecticut by 12 points or 16 points. And, it's D plus 15 in the voter file. So what? Change it. And unfortunately, they wasted so much time allowing those people to leave the Northeast. It's a depressed population area, so the targets get less and less each year. It's a tragedy. But yes, there are other states where Republicans should have been making more inroads. We just went over that map, by the way, on Wednesday with the change in the Hispanic vote over time and their religious affiliation and attendance. I didn't want to get into it because I don't like to go into these crazy things, but if you can shift Starr County like that, and if you can shift parts of Hidalgo, and if you could shift Zapata County to the point of a win, then you are missing huge opportunities in adjacent and or neighboring states where there are exactly very similar demographics that you just didn't give any attention to. What's the difference? Well, the difference is Trump visited all along those areas in South Texas. He went there. He campaigned there. He listened to people there. He reached out to people there. And I'm not saying he didn't anywhere else. He didn't like that. And it takes time. What do you think? Which battlegrounds listen, Arizona and Georgia is a good, and they're listing, it's Benny. Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Nevada. Okay. Adam Laxalt should have won Nevada. He didn't because his ground game sucked and he got ripped off by people who now work for Ron DeSantis with walking and reaching out, stuff like that. Even though he was underperforming Lombardo and Trump in Washoe County, he should still have been able to do better in Las Vegas and eke it out. And I really don't think he should have underperformed that badly in Reno, but he was not a great candidate, but his ground game sucked. Cortez Mastro is not a good candidate either. She just had a better ground game and got her, got her ballots in at the last minute. And then you had that blackout in Washoe. The Senate matters more. They'll let the governor slip by, but they won't let the Senate slip by. No doubt. I'm sure. Whatever. How it doesn't matter though, because Trump outperformed him so much in Washoe County. I mean, overwhelmingly, and in Clark County. If you've been with me a long time, you know how I feel and have felt for years about Nevada. I was told Republicans it was fool's gold, and don't worry about it. That being said, after polling it in 2022, I could see even though our Senate poll was Laxalt +2, which I believe was in September or August. It wasn't even a final poll. Going back and looking at it, you could see the loss for Laxalt coming. Why? Because there was a lot of decideds, a lot less undecideds in Washoe, and you could see Cortez Masto was going to take it by a hair. Even though our poll showed she'd take it by a lot more. The white vote was a little weird, and you could see she would probably eke it out, and she did. And then he underperformed Lombardo and Trump in Clark County. So even though it was Laxalt +2, you could see the undecideds there, especially among those who said they somewhat disapprove of Joe Biden. Those voters Republicans struggled with in the end to get to come over. A lot of them still voted Democrat, and that did a lot of them in. And that wouldn't have happened if they would have had a better turnout, because they would have gotten a lot more of their somewhat disapprove out, and they didn't. So I do think Nevada is a good target for Trump. I do. I think Nevada may, it's not as many electoral votes. I would not ignore it. I'm simply saying that you can kind of put Arizona and Nevada in the same basket, although Arizona is going to be much easier to flip than Nevada. Trump outperformed even Kerry Lake in the polling we were doing by like 3 points. He was outperforming Warnock by a lot. So you see people, speaking of Arizona, Garrett Archer and others mocking Rasmussen's poll in Georgia. Hello, we polled Georgia and Trump was way up as well, even though we had Walker up by a hair, but Trump was up by like 10 or 9 or something. It was a lot. Rasmussen had a very similar margin. Eastern Carolina University polled Georgia. They had Trump up by, I believe, 7. These were big swings from what everyone had shown in 2020. There was big movement. So you're talking about a state that Trump lost by 12,000 votes here, a couple thousand votes here. That's it. That's nothing. That's nothing. The performance in 2020, my point is this. Walker should have beat Warnock in round 1. He should have. And because he didn't, and because he was outspent grossly, and because he underperformed Trump in the Atlanta metro area and even in rurals, does not mean that state is getting away from Republicans beyond all hope. That's ridiculous. We're talking about a few thousand votes here, folks. Then outside of that, Wisconsin seems to poll the hardest for Trump out of, Michigan, Pennsylvania. I would put it like this. Michigan, the hardest. Pennsylvania, in the middle. And Wisconsin, the easiest one for Trump to pull back. Wisconsin is more rural than the others, and it doesn't have as many non-whites in it, particularly urban black voters. Even though Trump's doing better with them, it's still easier to win with them being less of a vote share. Asians are actually quite a bit in Wisconsin, but they still don't vote. Maybe they will eventually, but they still don't vote monolithically like black voters. So when you're looking at like Charlie's effort to go after Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin, you don't understand it, because those are the 3 states that are easier. Now with the change in the census, it's easier for a Republican to win the Electoral College, right? But still, when you're talking about a state he lost by a point, you go after it. When you're talking about another state he lost by 2 points, you go after it. Especially when Pressler is totally correct. And Scott, I wish you would not put identifying attributes up in your tweets. All right. Because the Democrats know they're there. And you're giving people like, how do you there are this many people in Wisconsin who have a hunting license but don't vote. Scott, stop. The police will go charge him with a felony or something. Stop. But he's right. Why does Scott Pressler know better than so many of these other people? Because he does this. He doesn't just talk about it. All right. Dread Robert. Do politicians really believe telling people the economy is good when people are living in a deteriorating reality? Do they believe it's effective? That's the first part of it. I think that they believe if you keep saying the same thing over and over again, eventually people will believe it. I do. I find it insulting. It makes them seem out of touch. And if it gets worse, they sound incompetent, transitory inflation. They claim a labor shortage with hours worked declining and employment unrecovered since 2019, et cetera, et cetera. Dread Robert, you're 100% correct. I mean, if this keeps going, we are now predicted for a recession in the presidential year, right as Donald Trump is likely to be wrapping up the Republican nomination. We're about to do negative growth. So this is a disaster for them. That's why I said the other day when it came out that we absolutely do predict now a recession for the presidential year. I said, get ready for the FBI to kick in more doors. Jack Smith is going to ask for more gag orders. This is what they're going to do, because you can't, Robert, when we all know the economy is in a recession, you can't pretend it's good. Like, it doesn't work that way. Even now, you can see, look at the Harvard-Harris poll. People are offended by that stuff. They're like, look, my wages aren't growing. You're full of crap. So it does have the potential to backfire. So question, locals, J32356. So question, seems like Rich agrees with this article that DeSantis' political influence is eroded. It seems to me like the Florida legislature are the ones with the real balls, and DeSantis isn't even reading what he's signing. There's some of that, but again, I think depending on who, I think they both get stuff out of the relationship, or did get stuff out of the relationship. But I think the most important thing in there was Perez's statement. And if you govern with the hammer, eventually people start to look like nails. That's it. That's it. And there will be fracturing of the party. It will not be as unified. He will be eroded very badly. Let me show you something, guys. Let me show you something. Hold on. I shouldn't do this yet, because then people always have a canary when something's different. But just bear with me. Signing into something. Bear with me. Is this the 400 from the phone? Let me make sure. Certain to vote, likely to vote, meaning to vote. Yeah, it is. How many Republicans are in this? Let's see. Where are we? Okay, so about 400 almost. Whoa, don't go away. About 400 interviews altogether. How many are Republicans? 206. Or how much was it? 480? Did you just see it? Okay, so it is more than that. 479. Quite a few are Republicans. Okay. This is what it looks like in Florida so far. Okay. Yeah, it just started. Yeah, it's unweighted. I'm going to have a sip of water while you digest it. The funny thing about this is the phone has always been Ron DeSantis' best component. So actually, Laura, I was wrong. He's below 16%. Well, he's rounded. If you round up, right? If you round up, it's 16, right? I thought he was 18. I guess that was last month's poll. It ended with the phone with him at 18. It's a disaster. This is not good for a sitting governor. You cannot get cream like this. You will lose power. You will lose clout. And again, the agenda will suffer for that party. So it's going to happen. In all the swing states, you have these crooked governors and secretaries of states. Rick, I get what you're saying. It's just, again, I mean, I do how many media appearances a week? I do the show 3 times a week. I told you how we can beat that. They want you to believe that he can't. That's what they want. They want it, nothing more. They want you defeated, feeling defeated, and like it's impossible. That's what they want. Absolutely. I've gone over 1,000,000 times how it can be. It can be right now, even with the electorate as it is. But why the hell would you keep the electorate as it is? Change it. They won't know how many to compensate for. By the way, Paxton's video, good for Ken Paxton to say what he said. Now that we're allowed to do this on YouTube, I'm actually going to play something, actually. Hold on. Come on. I wasn't going to do it, but what I'm telling you is they don't have, if you change the landscape the way that I said to change it, the way I've been saying is possible, there's not enough votes out there for them to pull what you're thinking they're going to pull, what you fear. It's not there. It's simply not. Looks like he's a ton of crap. So let me see. Let me see. I'm trying to find it, but it's some people are burying it, like crazy. Oh, here it is. Minute and 40 seconds. Yeah. Okay. So here's part of it. There's a couple of them actually, and one of them kind of feeds into that, so I don't want to say that, but yeah, I don't know which one is one he says it in. There's what he's drawing a distinction between the unsolicited vote and solicited mail-in vote, and I don't need to play it. He basically says, they stop counting so they can try to figure out how much they need. And what I'm telling you is, whether that's true or it's not, it doesn't matter if you change the electorate the way I have said over and over again. They don't have enough, is what I'm trying to say. They wouldn't have enough. There are several things you need to do. You need to change the electorate and increase participation, because the more you increase participation, the less of the pool of eligible, exploitable ballots you're leaving. All right. And until they do that, you're always going to have, that potential that they can do that, what Paxton said. And that's honestly, if Republicans allow that to happen again, that's on them. That really is. John Allen, how does Mississippi look? We're going to cover Mississippi, the governor's race. I would expect that to stay, to go Republican. But we'll see. And I know Louisiana's a little finicky right now, too. We got the jungle primary there. And Landry is the favorite as of right now, but in the Secretary of State's race, the Democrats actually slightly in the lead in the Trafalgar poll. He's usually pretty good at these jungle primaries in the South. But it's so close. Who knows? But Mississippi's interesting. We're going to cover that. We'll have that. Right. Oh, what was that? I wanted to kind of see that. But can Rich give us some insight politically if a recession occurs? We went over that. It will hurt Biden. Absolutely. And are more indictments going to come down because of this? I do think that's all they'll have left in their toolbox after that. So I do think, and that will cause, eventually we're going to hit critical mass, guys. The population will hit critical mass. Messina, Obama's 2020 manager, says he doesn't care about the polls, but looking at Democrats' overperformance in special elections have no predictive value for presidential elections. None at all. And all I would say about the special elections is that they show you Republicans cannot get outvote without America first. They cannot get the vote out. Nobody has an appetite to vote for Republicans. What I would say is, maybe it's a preview of what it would be like with Nikki Haley at the top of the ticket. But still, it doesn't matter. Again, it doesn't matter if you're reading this book or the emerging Democrat majority. There's a reason why they don't link presidential vote
uh, preference and trends in presidential vote to that, for instance, because it's not particularly predictive. It was a special election last year in Minnesota. There's a district Trump won by 10 points. Republicans won it by 4, a little over 4. And everyone was talking about how bad it was going to be for them in November with that district because Trump won it by 10. And really, in reality, if you went back and looked at Republican vote share in the last 4 cycles, you could see that he actually did well compared to the 1.2 and 1.8% wins in Minnesota too. It's just that Trump won it by 10. So we hear this a lot. When Republicans do well in special elections, people like him and others will tell you it doesn't matter. And they're right. But when Republicans do poor in special elections, it's some indicator of how bad it's going to go for Republicans. And I did see the David Sachs thing. What do you make of special elections? I mean, Lord, you're copy and pasting several of them. Again, the R+6 district is not going to be, it's not R+6 anymore. All right. And New Hampshire is changed and it's catching up with that change. It doesn't matter how much Sununu want to buy. It doesn't. Trump only won that by 0.3%, by the way. Believe that district you're talking about. And again, they nominated a guy who was literally saying he was engaging with like conversations with the prophets. I mean, let's get real. Remember Scott Walker from Wisconsin in 2016? He was supposed to be the darling GOP candidate that could win the Rust Belt states. And listen, John, I believe that. I didn't think he would win all of them, but I thought he had a good shot at Iowa, Ohio, and Wisconsin at that time. And that still left it up in the air. Well, where else could he win to put together, 270? But in my mind, nobody else had a chance to do it other than Walker. Didn't matter if he was still shy somewhere. Maybe Pennsylvania, enough attention, and maybe he could do that. But then, Trump came along and things changed real quick. And Walker went exactly where DeSantis went and others went and killed himself, And by the way, what happened to Walker in 2018? Right? He lost. He looked unbeatable at one time. Sometimes you have your name on the ballot one too many times, but he ran for re-election after he was decimated as a Republican candidate and embarrassed. And he even got out before, any votes were cast. So, and he came up shy. Which Republican politicians currently in power? Oh, I went over that. Blondie, please address private unions, 6% of the vote, and their anger with Biden and the Dems in Michigan. This is the thing, Blondie. It's like, where do they represent that 6%? And that's what's important, right? This is brilliant. I haven't commented about this yet, but I'll do it now. In 2016, Hillary lost a lot of members of private unions. In 2020, there was a lot of effort to basically put the screws to these people and make sure they went back to Biden, and most of them did. Now they're pissed. You see the UAW leaders still sticking with Biden as far as like statements about Trump coming to talk to the members. But this is what Trump needs to do again. If he wants to take back Michigan by, 30,000 to 100,000 votes, he needs to do stuff like this. And all of the people who constantly say, a decision Trump makes is bad for him, it's going to hurt him, just assume that everything they say is the opposite of the truth. Because he missed the debate. He didn't care about the debate. He skipped it last time because he's showing up would lend credibility to people who are polling as sampling errors. It's not worth his time. So no consultant worth his weight or worth anything would ever suggest that a candidate with that kind of a lead should do it. The reason I said do it is because the voters want to see him badger candidates. See, they want to see it. But if you have a chance instead to go reach out to UAW members and to go put yourself on the side of the worker suffering under Biden, being punished by Biden, Jesus, this is a no-brainer. And it's huge because elections are won on the margins. And let's see something. Blondie, let me look at something before I know what I think they were, what share they were. But just give me a second. It's loading. Just give it 1 second. And I should actually look in the voter file instead of this, but you know. All right. Let's look at a state like Michigan, for instance, Blondie. Okay. Because they're outsized shares. All right. In a state like Michigan. Are you a union household? 21%. Yes. No was 79%. I don't know if this still works this way. I think CNN may have changed it, but remember Biden won them 62-37 and they were 21%. Hold on 1 second. 2016 CNN exit polls. Let me just do that. It's just the easier way to do it. I think they changed a lot of their websites, but watch this. This is 16, right? Yeah. Let's go to Michigan. Okay, let's go to Union. Oh, I know why they were doing it now. They changed it. All right. So, yes was 28%. And look at how much closer it was. Look. That includes public and private. So how much more poor do you think Clinton performed with private households than public union households? Obviously, a lot better performance for the Democrat among public households than private union households. By the way, if you look at these exit polls, it just doesn't make sense to you, does it? I mean, Trump won the state of Michigan. So if 72% were no and Trump lost them by a point, okay? And 28% were yes and Trump lost them by 13, not the 30. He lost them against Biden. How did Trump win the state of Michigan if the exit polls are correct? I love it when something like this happens and I get to show you guys. All right. Hello. He had to have won one of those groups, right? So either the union household was much closer and he won the no's, or he won the no's by a lot more than that, right? So it can't be both, right? It's a huge deal. And I was listening to Peter talking about this, and apparently, as soon as it happened, Trump feels a connection to these voters, and as soon as it happened, he was like, make something, right, Laura? You heard this the other day. He said, make something happen. I need to get over to those folks. And it was immediate. I need to go see my peeps, and he's just, it's like they left the door ajar, and they're just begging for you to kick it open. And unfortunately, Shoveling is going to ask, how did Nikki get that number, with some of these polls, right? There's no way Nikki Haley could win a state like Michigan. There's no way Nikki Haley could win a state like Pennsylvania. These are all relatively anti-union Republicans. That's what hurt Rick Saccone, even though Trump went there and Rick Saccone was down by damn near 10 points the weekend going into the election. He did what he could. He held that rally and he evaporated Rick's deficit because some of those steel workers were like, okay, I'll give Rick a chance, but they still lost. This is a great example, by the way, because what was that? A special election against Connor Lamb. You remember that? It's a great example of how these Republicans underperform when Donald Trump is not on the campaign trail helping them. There's just no way. Even if the union share went down to 22% again, I mean, what do you think the margin is going to be like for non-Trump Republican candidates among those voters? It's going to be huge, guys. It's huge. Because the polls say one thing, they'll give you an idea of that margin. But then you have the get out the vote happening. And it will be a much more successful get out the vote attempt against a Nikki Haley or a DeSantis or a Mike Pence, because the members are going to go along with it at higher rates. But if it's against Donald Trump, that's what happened to Hillary. They didn't go along with it. Many of them didn't. And by the way, that's a big part of this when it comes to trade. The UAW issue. I don't know how proficient everybody is in what's the current event of what's going on with UAW, but this is a trade issue. This is an inflation issue. This is, you know, negotiation. So some of these jobs could go overseas. You're trying to negotiate a pay increase, and that's great if it's I get 20% extra over 10 years. But who the hell cares if we experience 35% inflation over that 10-year? Now their real wages are down. So normally you will see a lot of unions being greedy, and this is not one of those examples. This is an example of an opportunity to exploit voter remorse. Rick said, question, how does Kemp in Georgia win by 7, but the same voters vote to elect a very radical left-wing senator instead of Herschel Walker? That's a great question, Rick, because in our polling, we had Kemp winning by 7. Walker was up by 1. Where did that come from? There was, some gubernatorial elections, the party, ID is a lot less rigid. That's just true. Walker, as running for Senate, is more, it's going to be a more partisan vote. So some of the independents and and even some Democrats, although most of them still, Stacey was just like a terrible candidate this time, but in 2018 they voted in unison for her, so it was very close. But this time around, Kemp got rewarded by some Democrats as being like a Trump hater, right? So I know there's a lot of people who say something, machines this, machines that. People like Lynn Wood did grave damage in the psyche of the Republican electorate in the state of Georgia. He's a highly destructive character. But it is also true, I tell people all the time, that gubernatorial elections just are not the same as Senate elections. All right. Do either of you think something like COVID or COVID 2.0 is going to happen to sway the polls, or at least something that would have a mass society? I mean, there's always some possibility of that, Garrett. Absolutely. I don't think they can pull COVID again. I think people are, that's it. That's a wrap for that. This is a good question about Kerry. Yeah, I mean, I can tell you right now, Kerry Lake is running for Senate. I don't think I'd get an angry call if I said that. But if that takes her off the short list for VP, who is on Trump's VP short list? I don't want to blow up things that I've heard. And, someone like a gnome or something certainly wouldn't hurt him. I don't think so. But I have said myself that if you're going to replace Johnson, replace him now, and Johnson would be a good, solid VP choice. I just, I don't want to, I don't want to get into some of the other names I've heard. A couple of them I do know is kind of true. But congressmen, and let me say this is just for public consumption. Congressmen and women do not make good vice presidential picks. Senators, sure. Governors, absolutely. Congressmen and women do not. People don't trust a representative from the House to be ready to be in the position of president. And that goes for TDP, who said, should he consider Gates? Matt is solid, would be solid, but he's a member of the House, and he obviously wants to run for governor. Tim Pool just had Matt Gaetz on, and Tim proposed that Biden would drop out, and Tim proposed that Biden would drop out, Michelle Obama would take his place, and that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. She does not want to do it. That's number one. But number two, she's going to come across as likable as Kamala Harris. I'm serious. And I know people, Rich, what is that, a dog whistle? No, she's nasty like Kamala is nasty. And I mean, Hillary Clinton once had a 60-something % favorability rating with Gallup when she was the Secretary of State. And then it came across, then the country got to know the real Hillary. It's not going to happen anyway. Slimer Ball, yep. Yeah, New Hampshire is just too, thank you, Drew. They're trying to make you think about stupid, superficial arguments instead of being more, being a viewer and a listener of Inside the Numbers. New Hampshire is too professional at this point, and the state level races are eventually going to start shifting. Could something happen to change that, Jerry? Absolutely. Coalitions change all the time. But if you remember, Kelly Ayotte did worse than Trump when she didn't embrace him in 16. And the University of New Hampshire poll had Trump losing to Hillary Clinton by a bigger margin than Ayotte was down. All the polls were showing Ayotte was outperforming Trump. That did not happen. She underperformed him. Talking about a handful of votes. I just think it's too professional now. It's changed a lot. Now, you go after Maine. It certainly doesn't hurt you in New Hampshire, but everyone focuses on New Hampshire, and I would go after Maine. I really would. I'm not sure there's an impact on the mayor of Dallas switching Republican. Nothing that can be spoke of right now. Haven't heard anything about the elections going on in Virginia. Yeah, I mean, some, sure. Some of them are going to be real tough for Republicans to keep control of that legislature. Or even regain some of the ones that did lose. I would say this, that the Republicans are doing a good effort to get out the vote there. Youngkin, it matters when leaders come out and push for early voting. They're not doing it, and that's another thing. And you want to talk about these special elections? The early get out the vote effort sucks. It sucks. The only marginal benefit the only marginal gains that Republicans have had in get out the vote are little experiments that we've run in certain parts of the Rust Belt. What will the impact? Oh, I already had that. Yes, I did see that Gates said that Kay Granger bailed on her responsibilities. That's right, Matt. So, you should call John O'Shea. Wink, wink. YouTube. RFK gets a serious chance to compete. No, he's not. We're not there for the House pickup seats yet. Senate's easy, actually. Senate's really usual suspects, but with the House, we're not there yet. Actually, the stuff we have been going over so far, the House is going to be tough if Donald Trump is not the nominee. I know that's the exact opposite of what you hear, but there's only one way you're going to do better with some of these districts where non-white voters did not show up in 2022. Some of them Republicans barely eked out. They're going to lose if, there's not somebody on the ballot that appeals to those non-white votes. I'm not going to be doing a generic ballot for Virginia. No. We're already trying to still fund Georgia in the national. We don't want to, I'm not going to do what I did in 18 or 22, excuse me, spread myself too thin. I would rather poll a few races and have the ability to maintain a trend with them than open myself up to what are really ridiculous and unfair attacks from the idiot detractors who wanted certain candidates to win. I really have to take objection with these morons who are blaming me for Ron DeSantis' decline. I have got to take an objection. Locals knows what I'm talking about. After what you did to Ron DeSantis, we're going to just rally behind you. First of all, what are you talking about? Rally behind me. My job is to tell the truth. Insofar as I may sound, insofar as it may sound like I'm pushing some particular candidate, it's because that's the candidate the voters want. I view my job as to represent the voters. You didn't make the sales pitch. You went after everybody. You libeled me. You defamed me. You slandered me. You smeared me. All I did was tell the public the truth. God, thank God. Thank God you people aren't going to be in charge. Amateur hour from the jump. Democrats will eat you for breakfast. After the primary, and Trump is the last man standing, which is the absolute most likely scenario, do you think some of the donors you talk to who are anti-Trump now will find their way back to him for the general? Some, but many, I think David Giglio was right. Many are bitter, small people, I'm sorry, and they will claim being poor. I'm sorry to say it, but I do believe that. Where is the best place to find precinct level GIS election maps? Nowadays, are you talking about before or after the elections? Some of this stuff, guys, you just don't have. Yeah, I don't know if you mean before or after elections. There are some people who do it after the elections, but there is no precinct level election results in this country anymore as the election's going on. That's just the truth. Why? Because of the advent of mail-in votes. They don't do it. Does a politician think that they do one really good thing that people like, it will override all the bad stuff they did and win them re-election? Yes, hotcake. Some politicians do believe that. Jerry said, and others, I like Ron Johnson, but that seat is gold. I would not want Evers to appoint the replacement, and I don't think any other Republican can win an election in Wisconsin. I think it's possible if you have some people get behind Michaels. I think Michaels could have won the governor's race if he was not sabotaged. And this is, again, something else that I am, by a lot of these people, somehow they are faulting me for Republicans underperforming in 2022. All the ingredients were there for the Republican Party to do well in 2022. They sabotaged themselves and they didn't focus on the infrastructure they needed to get out their vote. They still thought this was a game of persuasion. I don't know what to tell you. It's not my job to make sure a party wins. It's not yet anyway. I don't know what the hell these people are talking about. It's really delusional. Some of them are that's a moderately delusional one, guys. Some of the stuff I've gotten recently is scary stuff, like really scary. I'm glad the libels and the smears against me are not true, and I absolutely get to carry and own guns because I got family, and some of these people sound crazy, right, Laura? Crazy. And Laura's always like, I don't like how you are so open with some of the information, but people can find it. NBC News tracked me right down. Like that. I never said anything. Like they find it. And if they can, nutcases can. So thank God for the Second Amendment. Amen. Don't forget to support the public polling project we're trying to do. Whoops, that's the wrong one. My fault. We are trying to obviously fill up Georgia and fill up the national poll. So don't forget. Also, of course, best time right now to join up to the locals community. If you're on the locals community, you just got the 2 voter file analysis from Pennsylvania. I wanted to get a baseline before automatic voter registration. Changed a lot of those numbers, whether they go to the right or they go to the left. Okay. That does represent, even though one of them is largely D+5, the other one's closer, a little over D+5. That is still a shift, continued shift to Republicans, even though the exit polls, when, for instance, these Rust Belt states, they're more, Democrats were 40% in Michigan, Republicans were 31, independents were 29, and yet Trump still got it that close, which is incredible. Oh, no, that's 16. Sorry. And yet Trump still won it. In 2020, though, these Rust Belt states, it's like people are, Donald Trump lost independence because he made so many of them from 16 Republicans, self-identified Republicans. That's why he lost them. In Michigan, it went from being, double-digit D plus in 2016 to being even at 38. Democrat 38, Republican 38, Independent 23. And yes, Trump lost independents by 51-45. But that's because so many more people identified as being Republicans, 9 percentage points more. So if independents were actually 32% and Trump won those people 94-6, how would the independent spread have looked then? Right? So a lot of people just don't seem to get that's how this goes. Wisconsin, same deal. Pennsylvania, same deal. The voter file going into the 2020 election in Pennsylvania was D+8 still. And yet, when they went to tell the exit polls, it was R+1. And everyone's generally in agreement with that. So if you got 2 voter file analysis on locals for Pennsylvania, you got all records. And then you got only active records. And by the way, why did I want to show you this? One, I wanted you to see that baseline, and then 2, Folks, of those 300,000 plus inactive records, who are these people? This is the problem. When I say the voter rolls are dirty, they're dirty. Only 70,000 of them are Republican. 200 plus thousand are Democrat. So that's a problem. You have no way to change that right now. And the Secretary of State is certainly not going to do their job. They're not going to abide by the National Voter Registration Act of 1993. They're going to ignore it like they always do. Instead of bitching and moaning about it, go and get more people. That's the only way at this moment. That's the only power you have. You can't change it. And it's not worth whining about. But you can overcome it. Because the non-registered eligible voting population in Pennsylvania is a gold mine for Republicans. Democrats have targets, sure. But it's whiter. It's less African American. It's at more than 30% only have a high school education. That's more than the exit polls from 2020. That's more than the normal electorate. At least 60% of them are verified homeowners, yet their home values are not high. Pennsylvania is an older state, yet that population is slightly older and middle-aged working than the electorate has been. So what do you tell me? Democrats did that, even though it was risky, because they're worried Trump's just going to beat them there anyway. For them, it's worth the risk because they know how to go out and get those people. They are more confident in their ability and understanding to go out and get those people. So they're willing to take that risk because they don't think Republicans are smart enough or have the understanding or motivated or unity, all of that. They don't believe they have any of that to be able to capitalize on that opportunity. Ditto Wisconsin, ditto Michigan, ditto everywhere. Go get them and then stop whining. I don't know what else to tell you. Sunday. Emerging Republican majority. Huge audience for the book club. 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sunday. Don't miss it. You don't have to have the original version. I got both versions. I was reading the newer version this past week. We'll move on to the emerging. We're Democrat majority when we're done with this one. So I'm so glad that there were so many more people in it this past weekend, and I hope that continues this weekend because it's so critical, so important. And when we're talking about a lot of these things coming into election year now, you really have to have this understanding, like this special election talk. I won Florida by 19 points talk. I mean, it's just not, it doesn't matter. All right. So we have to look, if you want to understand the realignment that you're in now, you have to understand, you have to see these theses and whether, and again, understand the thesis of this book, even Textera in Democratic majority. It doesn't mean they're wrong because Textera's thing didn't happen, right? It's still, he was right. If things would have panned out the way he said, he would have been right. Unfortunately, they didn't hold on to that share of the white working class. Why? Because a person named Donald Trump came along. That's why. All right. So we're going to get into all of this. Don't miss it. 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is a big turnout, but that's for local supporters and YouTube members. All right. So you'll get that Zoom invite on Sunday. I didn't miss anything. Next week, we'll talk about what the schedule is going to be. I'm going to try to make this work, but I am going on Timcast on Friday, next Friday. All right. So I know I have to travel and I got to leave the date, at least the day before. So we're going to figure out how Friday is going to work. If I can get to the hotel and get set up, I may do like a low-tech version of Inside the Numbers for Friday, or at least something shorter. All right. So, but we'll talk about that come Monday. All right. Other than that, stay tuned. Number love for you. Thanks for watching. Share the public polling project far and wide. Let's get it funded. Let's get it done so we can get back more. And I will see you next week. Locals and YouTube members, I will see you soon. Locals, I'll see you in a couple, as always. All right, that's it. I'm out. I'm kicking rocks. And looks like Laura's dealing with some other stuff, so I'll just say it for her. Deuces, folks. Thanks for watching. I hear her laughing in the background. Yeah, you busy with the little one. Deuces.
Miss Winnie, Laura wants me to answer that question. Locals. We would absolutely prefer locals. All right. I'm glad I'm still here. All the best. Yeah, definitely locals. Peoplespundit.locals.com.